right, folks, welcome to week 13. We're getting down there. We've just got 2 weeks to go after this one, so everybody hang in there. You almost made it. Okay? So, this week what we're going to be talking about is argument with purpose. Now, we've pretty much done everything that I can to try to present for you the basics of each of the styles of writing that you guys are having to do in this class. So, what I want to deal with today is basically why you would need to use these skills going forward. Okay? What circumstances you may find yourself in that may require your ability to articulate an argument. Okay? And do it in a logical manner. So let's take a look at this. I promise this is not going to be nearly as long as the previous few weeks have been. But we're going to try to take a look at argument with purpose and try to see what we can do to help you understand why you need these skills. So, let's talk about the purpose of an argument. What you've written up to this point in the class, they've been primarily arguments that exist for the reason of intellectual exercise. For instance, classical argument rhetoric has its roots in the earliest forms of rhetoric pioneered by philosophers. This is primarily how philosophers communicate with each other, is through classical argument rhetoric. Okay? This is how lessons were taught at the classical academy in ancient Greece. This is how the great thinkers of that time operated. Okay? It was all very much intellectual, all very much theoretical, all very much hypothetical. Okay? Evaluations have a very focused, very limited purpose that is only intended to express an opinion rather than urge action. Okay? So an evaluation isn't necessarily something that's going to encourage people to take action on something, so much as there's something that's going to give your opinion on what you think of it and allow people to make their own decision of whether they do anything about it or not. Proposal essay, on the other hand, has a twofold purpose, and that is being used to create a solution to a pressing problem, and it's also trying to convince the audience that it's correct. Okay? So you have two purposes here, the purpose that a proposal is serving. Okay? You need to show that you have a solution to the pressing problem at hand, and you need to persuade your audience, to convince them that your solution is the right one. So, the main two purposes that you have for argument is arguing to solve a problem and arguing to prevail. Okay? Both of these are present in proposal essays. So let's take a look at solving a problem first. Okay? So, if you look at most arguments, typically both sides have a vested shared interest in the subject of the argument and the outcome of the dispute. So both sides want to have some kind of positive outcome, and they mainly differ as to what the definition of a positive outcome will be. Okay? That's where your argument essay comes in, where you're taking a side. Okay? Again, the arguments on both sides in this case are intended to present competing solutions for resolving the dispute, solving the problem in their own ways. So, one side's going to present their solution. The other side present their solution. Maybe a third side presents a totally different solution. Okay? So, presenting solutions to these dispute. And they compete with each other. The persuasive element then becomes convincing the audience affected by the dispute of which side has the best solution. Okay? So you're solving the problem, and you need to convince your audience that you have the solution. Okay? Keep in mind, though, the best solution does not always equate to the right solution. Okay? One thing you have to keep in mind is shades of gray moralities. Okay? What that basically means is that the solution that is the correct solution may not necessarily fit with everyone's set moral code. Okay? A lot of modern disputes fall into this category where you have one side that says, oh no, we can't do that, that's immoral. But then you have the other side that says, you might think it's immoral, but there's a lot of people that don't, and there's a lot of people that could be benefited from this solution. Okay? You could probably think of at least three current events problems, current events disputes that fall into this category, where you have two competing sides, and one side says we're not doing this because it's immoral, but the other side saying we need to do this because it's going to be helpful. Okay? Keep in mind that winning the argument does not always equate with action. So you may be proposing that we do nothing. Okay? You may be on the side of let's maintain the status quo. And maybe that's what people choose to go with because it's the least disputable action. The problem being is, are you really going to advance anything just by standing still? Okay? That's the one thing to consider if you're going to argue that no action needs to take place. Okay? So, arguing to solve a problem is one of the most commonplace occasions for creating and putting forth an argument. Okay? It's most of the time what you're seeing in terms of the purpose for arguments. Okay? Yagelski gives you in the textbook 3 concrete examples of topics which lead to arguments being presented as problems requiring a solution. Okay? So first one here. Members of a student organization decide whether to spend surplus funds on new equipment. Okay? So hypothetically speaking, you have a student organization such as an AV club or something like that. They have outdated equipment. Maybe they're still running with Betamaxes or something like that. And they need to raise money to get new equipment because the funding for the school isn't going to allow for it. So they're going to raise the money on their own to purchase the new equipment. Okay? If they have surplus funds from that they have at the end of the year, they can debate whether they should use it for that new equipment. Or they could say, you know what, we've had a good year, let's spend this on a pizza party. Okay? Or somebody else may have another solution for the money, maybe give it to charity or something like that. Okay? People are going to present their ideas, and it's going to be up to the audience to decide who's got the best idea. Okay? Second example, I'm going to skip for now. We're going to go to that third example. Parents and school officials decide the best measures for increasing safety at their elementary school. This is a hot topic right now, especially because we've had so many school shootings in the last decade. Okay, honestly, in the last 30 years. I mean, this problem dates back to the 90s. Okay, 1999 with Columbine. All right, so parents and school officials basically debating how do we keep these elementary kids safe. Okay, thus far the solutions that have come to mind have actually been implemented. Include no gun-free zones, designating schools as gun-free zones, possession of firearms within those gun-free zones constitutes a felony. Okay, school resource officers, where you have a police officer that is permanently stationed at the school to assist with security issues. Okay, that is kind of a controversial issue because it's been hit or miss in terms of success, but it's the only time you hear about school resource officers is when they're either doing something wrong, like violently handcuffing children, or in the case of the Parkland shooting, the school resource officer decided to save his own butt. And when the gunman was present on campus, he literally ran away, ran from the school. Okay? So there's a lot of debate over other measures that could be taken. One of them that came after Parkland, let's arm teachers. Yeah, that's a great idea. You get one unstable teacher who can't control a kid, and next thing you know, he's popping a cap in him. Okay, we don't want that. Okay, we do not want that. You have a lot of different approaches. Okay. Another one, lockdowns. Okay, lockdowns and lockdown drills. That is another solution that's been put out there. Okay, it's a hot topic. It's hotly debated. Nobody's really found the right answer yet, and nobody's sure if there even is a right answer. But school districts are going to keep debating this. Let's backtrack to that second one there, and I want to do that because I actually have experience with this. Okay, community residents debate whether to increase property taxes to build a new school building. Okay. let me get into some mild story time here. Okay, I'm from Michigan. Okay, I spent 13 years of my life in Michigan. I went to high school there. My first year in high school, I got affected by this very issue. Okay, the way that school funding works in Michigan, especially with public schools, is typically a school district will run what's called a millage election. Okay, and what that is basically a yes or no vote referendum to the citizens of a town of the school district, asking if they can increase property taxes by a certain percentage. It's usually measured in mills. Mills. 1 mil is equivalent to 1/1000th of a cent. Okay. So typically you have multiple mills on the ballot. Okay. Most times when they were voting for it in that particular district, they were voting for 5 mil increases or 3 mil increases. Okay. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you add it up amongst with all of the property in the town, it winds up amounting to a good amount of money. Okay, so schools use this money for their funding, in addition to any federal funding that they get, in addition to any state funding that they get. The problem being that Michigan was also where Betsy DeVos was from, so she started strangling the state money to public schools in favor of charter schools. Okay, in favor of religious-based private schools and charter schools. So public schools were getting the shaft. All right, they became more reliant on villages. Okay, here's the thing: not every resident is going to want to have their property taxes increased because not everybody has school-aged children. Okay, so some people are going to say, "Why should I care about the schools? I don't want to be funding something that I don't directly benefit from." That was actually the case in my freshman year in high school. A millage had failed. They had run an election for a 2 mil increase. Okay, and it wasn't for anything like a new building or anything like that. It was for operational funds. Okay, it was basically for day-to-day operational funds, and it got voted down. Okay, you might be wondering what was the result of that. Well, I can tell you the result of that was there was no busing that year. Okay? I should be more specific. There was no busing to school for regular students that year. Okay? We all had to be car riders, or if the upperclassmen were lucky enough to have a car, they could drive. Okay? Yeah. So, busing to school, gone. Most activities, including sports, became pay to play. Okay, depending on the sport, you had to pay a certain amount of money to participate in that sport, in addition to anything that you spent for equipment for that sport. And depending on the sport, it ranged anywhere from $50 to $350 per athlete. Okay. I know at least the football team used their money to pay for, guess what? Busing, so that they could take a bus to games. Okay. However, I was in the band. That did not include the band. The band was a competitive band. We actually did meets every week, and they were all around the state. We needed busing too. We couldn't get it because we weren't considered to be that important. So all the parents had to carpool the students to every single one of the meets. And some of these were like 2.5, 3 hours away from the place where we were living. Okay? It got to be ridiculous after a while. In the spring of that year, they ran another millage proposal. This time I believe it was for 4 mils. Okay, and included in this one, it wasn't just operational costs; it was also renovations to the high school. My entire sophomore year, that millage passed. Okay, so the next year we got our busing back. The next year, activities got their busing back. They did not have to be paid to play anymore. Also, that next year, the entire high school was spent that year in a construction zone, because of all the renovations that were now taking place, because now they had the funding to do it. Okay? But, like I said, you have a lot of arguments on both sides here. You have arguments from the parents of the students in the school district saying, hey, we need these services. Why are you strangling them? Then you have the argument from the non-parental residents of the district that are saying, why should we pay for your kids? Okay? They're your brats, you deal with them. Which is basically the attitude. Okay? This is on top of people who would run for the school district school board, many of which had ulterior motives. Remember that school board had at least one member who wanted to eliminate all arts. Okay, no music, no art, no creative writing, everything like that gone. You keep the sports because those are revenue generators, but we need to get rid of all the arts because how else are we going to pay for the sports that we're keeping? Okay, so honestly, one funny thing that always comes to mind now because of that situation, if you ever see ads for Kellogg's Frosted Flakes, they're always running ads talking about sports are being removed from schools. Like when? That's what I say. Okay? I have never, ever, ever seen a school district remove a sport. And the sports they're talking about, the ads are talking about baseball, basketball, football. Never. If it's a smaller Olympic sport, then yeah, I've seen that happen. A lot of colleges have pulled back on Olympic-style sports. One of the sports I was eliminated when I went to college was fencing. Okay, the college I went to eliminated fencing as a program, and gymnastics. Okay, but God forbid they lose their football program. All right. So, this is another situation where you have an argument that you're trying to solve a problem. In this case, the problem being is where was this funding going to come from? Okay. Both sides of each of these arguments has a vested interest in its outcome because they are directly affected by them. Okay. Therefore, each side argues what they feel is the best possible solution. So look over each of these circumstances. The student organization, it's going to affect them because they'll either get the new equipment that they need, or they'll use the money for something else that hopefully will be beneficial to them, and hopefully not just go into somebody's pocket. Community residents. The community residents debating about the new school building. We've just talked about that. Some people are going to benefit from this because their students will have that new school building. Others will not benefit from it because they don't have kids going to school and they're still paying for it. Okay? Increased safety at the elementary school. Both sides want to have increased safety. It's just a matter of how you achieve that. Okay? They have a vested interest in this. Here's the other purpose that you have for most argument. That's arguing to prevail. This is probably the most concrete possible purpose for an argument. There are consequences from the outcome of the argument, so one side or the other must win. Okay? When we talked about classical argument, we talked about the purpose of classical argument being to advance knowledge, to learn. Okay? That's all well and good as long as you're dealing with a hypothetical situation. In these cases, you have a very real and very concrete problem and very real and concrete consequences to whatever decision's made. So both sides are really vested in making sure that they have the best outcome, that they have the correct outcome, that the outcome benefits them most. Okay? An argument to prevail is an argument that must take precedence and rise above any opposing arguments to win the argument. Commonly, these types of arguments are involved with high-stakes disputes where inaction is not an option, and actions one way or another will greatly negatively affect whichever group comes up short. Okay? That is not to say that sometimes groups feel they will, if they come up short, they feel that it's going to cause great harm to them and it really doesn't matter to them. It doesn't really affect them much. Okay? There are a lot of social issues that come to mind about that. Even right now, we have the whole voting rights disputes that are coming up with all these states that are enacting new voter laws that are supposed to ensure against fraud that hasn't ever been proven to be widespread. And the only ones that are actually getting affected negatively, okay, if the laws don't pass, if the laws are stricken down, if the new SB1 in Congress passes, the only ones that are going to get affected by that are the politicians themselves. Okay. However, if that SB1 does not pass and all these state bills do pass, you're going to have a huge number of people that are going to be affected by this negatively because they're going to be disenfranchised. Their vote's not going to count for nothing. In fact, some of them won't even be allowed to vote, or it's going to be made so insanely difficult to vote that it's not going to be worth their time and effort. Okay, so this is where you have an argument to prevail here. This would be a circumstance where you have people very passionately on both sides arguing their side has to win. Okay. Arguments to prevail are usually involved in important and controversial subjects, such as these situations that Yelsky presents in the textbook. Okay? So first, students make a strong case against allowing a controversial anti-immigrant organization to demonstrate on campus. Okay? This is actually becoming more and more prevalent as you see a lot of these alt-right groups that are trying to demonstrate. Okay, for instance, the Charlottesville demonstration was in and around University of Virginia. Okay, student organizations are trying to combat some of this stuff to make sure, you know what, this is going to cause an unsafe circumstance. We don't want this happening. Okay, they will present arguments that have to prevail in order to stop that group from demonstrating. Members of a law enforcement organization argue against the state's adoption of stand your ground self-defense laws, which they believe lead to more gun violence. Okay, let's just put it this way: it's not necessarily about the gun violence element with stand your ground that makes it so controversial. It tends to be the racial aspect, because if you look at the history of the stand your ground defense, most times you will find that it's being used by white defendants to defend that they shot a black person. Okay? And when actual people of color use it, they wind up not having it apply, saying it doesn't apply to your circumstance. Okay? There's a very famous case from Florida around the same time as the Trayvon Martin shooting. A woman was arrested for attempted murder when she fired warning shots at her husband who was attempting to rape her. The shots didn't even come close to hitting him. She argued stand your ground. Court said, no, you can't argue stand your ground. We're going to convict you for murder, for attempted murder. So that's what makes that type of a law so controversial. But there will be arguments on both sides saying, we need these laws. We need these laws because people need to feel safe. No, you don't need these laws because it's just going to turn everybody into Dirty Harry or the guy from Death Wish. Okay? All you're doing with standing your ground, honestly, is breeding vigilantes. Okay? A resident strenuously opposes a town bill restricting gas drilling on the grounds that it will deprive residents of much-needed income. Okay? So he's actually saying, I do not want you to restrict this gas drilling because we're all going to profit from it. We're all going to benefit. But maybe the town bill is thinking in terms of environmentalism. It's in terms of, we do not want this in our town because it's going to ultimately hurt the environment. It's going to make it a worse place to live in. Doesn't matter whether you're richer or not, you can't breathe money. Okay? So these are types of arguments that you have where you'll have a lot of arguing to prevail. These situations are arguments where the arguer not only opposes a position, but must convince others to oppose it as well so that it does not get enacted. These arguments come from extremely strong convictions. Okay? I say extremely strong convictions. All right. Uh, in my experience, I have found that the stronger people feel about something, the better they will actually be able to articulate their ideas. Okay. And the better they will write, honestly. Okay. And the better they will, the better they try to comprehend the circumstances and then present a well thought out argument on their side. Okay. Here's one thing to keep in mind, though. Don't let passion blind you to facts. If the facts presented do not match up with the worldview that you are arguing from, then you're going to have to acknowledge, hey, maybe I need to rethink my argument. Or maybe I need to, I don't know, maybe not necessarily change my opinion, but maybe I need to approach it from a different way. Okay, maybe I need to do a little bit more research before I try blindly arguing it. Strong ethical practices need to be in place when writing an argument to prevail. You need to believe in what it is you're arguing rather than simply argue for the purpose of winning. Okay? Because if you're arguing for the purpose of winning, there's no point in your argument. Okay? There'll be no real weight to it. There's no heft to it. You need to believe in what you're arguing about if you're going to argue to prevail. Okay? Finally, keep the ethics of your argument in mind as you craft your argument. Keep in mind the way that you think about the argument, the way you think about the issue. Keep in mind, you need this to pass because a lot of people are going to be hurt if it doesn't. Or you need this to not happen because a lot of people will be hurt if it does. Okay? However, whatever side you're taking, however you're having to look at it. Okay? You have to think about the people that are going to be directly affected. Okay? That's the main thing to keep in mind with the ethics. Okay? Who's going to be affected? How are they going to be affected? What's going to happen if your argument fails? All right, so that will do it for this week. Like I said, this is a shorter session. Now, we only have 2 of these sessions left. I will let you know that we're pretty much getting down to the wire here on everything. All right, so give me a minute here. Yeah, so the things that you're currently working on would be the proposal essay. Okay. Make sure that you are still drafting your proposal essays. Okay. Make sure that you are still working on BindTap and still working with the discussion boards. Okay. One thing I want you to keep in mind as well, the lecture exercise discussion board also counts in that discussion board grade. Okay, so if you have skipped any of the video lecture exercises, now would be a good time to go back and catch up on what you missed. Okay, because once the semester ends, that board locks and you won't have any more time to do it. Same with MindTap. As soon as the semester ends, that site locks, and you will not have any more time to do any activities there. Okay. So continue working on your proposals. Keep up the good work. Next week, we'll have a brief business keeping. We'll have a brief housekeeping session. Next week will also be the revision workshops for the proposals. Okay. That in mind, see you guys next week. Thank you for watching.